hypothesis. Right now, we know for a fact there's only one way of producing that image on the shroud because of its peculiarities. Radiation. It's the only way. Now, there's two kinds of radiation that could do it. One has been postulated by John Jackson and by Paolo Di Lazzaro, and their team actually did a test on what was called columnated ultraviolet vacuum radiation. And what it would have taken to produce that image in that way, which you would have gotten very, very precise three-dimensional imaging from it, it would be 6 to 8 billion with a B, billion watts of light energy for 1/40 billionth of a second. That's the requirement. 500,000 searchlights worth of light energy to give rise to that image for 1/40 billionth of a second. Dead bodies do not normally do this. But at the same time, what is also required is that the body becomes spiritual. The body becomes mechanically transparent so that the shroud can actually penetrate at least 3/16 of an inch into the body so that you can get the layering, the depth layering from an MRA-like approach, right? The depth layering of the bones inside the hand, the bone in the backbone compared to the skin on the surface, all that depth layering on the inside as well as the outside from the skin to the shroud itself is all recorded perfectly on the shroud. So the body's got to become spiritual. Dead bodies generally don't do that either. Now I'm going to cut to the chase. There's one other radiation hypothesis that explains every single enigma on the shroud, and that's called the particle radiation hypothesis. I don't have enough time to explain it right now, but particle radiation hypothesis comes from what's called a low temperature nuclear disintegration. So every stable atomic nucleus in that body is going to simultaneously start disintegrating in a low temperature nuclear reaction. And so the body is literally disappearing away. And as the body disappears away, of course, as it's disappearing, it's going to give rise to one major neutron flux, proton alpha particle flux, right? You're going to get all this shower of particles just blasting out of this body in a big white light. And by the way, a big boom. And of course, when all of this happens, you can actually get not only the image there, but you can explain a bunch of other things on the shroud that are hitherto unexplained. First of all, you don't even have to worry about how the body became spiritually transparent if the body disintegrated, literally in a nuclear reaction. But what's even more important is you can explain how the bloodstains have perfect integrity on the shroud. How could the shroud be lying on that body for a day and a half at least, and then somebody come along after all the blood is coagulated between the body and the shroud and rip that shroud right off? You'd have so many disfigurements of those bloodstains, et cetera, et cetera. Not a one is there on that shroud. The blood on the shroud is in incredibly good condition. Number two, the actual color of the blood, right? Most blood as it gets older becomes brownish, blackish. The blood on the shroud is bright red. All you need is a neutron flux to explain that baby. And of course, the same thing, right, if you start going to tremendous longevity of the cloth. I mean, this cloth has lasted, it's like resistant to solvents, it's resistant to everything. You know, you look at it and you go, how is this possible? And I'll just come to the chase, you know, right now. That you get a neutron flux going, and those neutrons are going to break the carbonyl bonds inside the cloth, and when they break it, they're going to reinforce in much more structured, better carbonyl bonds that are in chains that are much stronger, and that's the explanation. I'll just quickly go to the final thought. I mean, when you look at this, we have now a test where we can prove this. All we need to do is get at that shroud the next time time the scientific test goes forward. Because if there was a real nuclear reaction, a low temperature nuclear disintegration, by the way, this is a real miracle. Bodies do not go through a complete nuclear disintegration simultaneously after death and leave big, huge light and booms. They just don't do this. So, of course, the main thing to recognize is we got a test now, and that test is cosmogenic isotopes. And so if we start finding an abundance of chlorine-36 and calcium-41 that are only produced in nuclear reactions, and they're there in abundance on this shroud, you had a nuclear reaction there. Particle radiation's the explanation, and particle radiation's the explanation. It's a miracle. If ultraviolet radiation's the explanation, it's a miracle. In other words, we're getting to the point now where we can see not only Jesus Christ and the truth of him in his words and in his spirit and in his church, we can see Jesus Christ now through the lens of science, risen in glory, risen in light, risen, as it were, master of the nuclear power of the universe, risen as God would have us discover it 2,000 years later in a skeptical scientific generation, so he could just go, gotcha. Thank you so much, everybody.